Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Ian Edwards, Leader of the Council and Chairman of Cabinet. Good evening to anybody who may be following us online and also to members of the public present. Thank you for your attendance. Should a fire alarm sound, we will be evacuating the building. The speediest exit from the property is out the way you came and down the stairs, but don't worry, there are so many of us around the table that are familiar with this part of the building. We will very speedily escort you out. Can I ask everybody please to have their mobile phones and other devices turned to silent? This is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting, therefore there's no speaking rights for members of the public, and the meeting is in two parts. The first part is held in public, when the discussion is of matters of policy and reports around the council's performance and budget, for example. And in the private part, part two, these are contractual matters, which is not advisable and appropriate to discuss in public. There will be a there will be a break in the meeting between part one and part two, when the YouTube link will be broken and members of the public will be invited to leave. Okay, we'll crack on with the agenda, please. Apologies for absence, Mark.
All Cabinet members are present.
Item 2, declarations of interest and matters coming before the Cabinet before this meeting. No, thank you. And to approve the minutes of the last meeting, 1 to 16. Thank you. And before we do get into the items of business, I do just wish to place on record my thanks, and I thank the thanks of predecessors, for the performance of Councillor Mills, who was a former Cabinet member, who is no longer a Cabinet member, for the exceptional length of service, 22 years, I believe, in the Cabinet. I mean, it's unthinkable from my perspective that somebody serves for that long, but enormous credit and of enormous benefit to the residents of this borough and to the council. And I just wish to record the Cabinet's thanks for that service, and also to welcome Councillor Tuckwell to his first Cabinet meeting. We turn now to agenda item 5 in part 1, which is the social housing allocation policy. Councillor Tuckwell.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and I'm pleased to present the report on social housing allocation policy this evening, but I'd also like to place on record my thanks to Councillor Lavery, who did all the heavy lifting on this policy, and I'm just sort of nudging it over the line. And Councillor Lavery may wish to add a couple of comments at the end, but it's great to be here on my maiden voyage on the Cabinet this evening. So the purpose of this policy is to provide a mechanism to assess housing need, advertise available social housing, and to allocate properties to households in need. In July 2024, Cabinet approved the proposed changes for the policy for public consultation, and that consultation was exceptionally comprehensive, running for 11 weeks from August 24 to October 2024. It included an online survey, paper copies, and various engagement events with key stakeholders, including a wide range of feedback that was then gathered. I would also like to place on record my thanks to the Resident Services Select Committee for their due consideration for this policy before it comes before us this evening. The key findings from the consultation have been exceptionally positive, with 62 to 75% of respondents agreeing or strongly agreeing with the proposed changes. This feedback highlights the community's support for a clearer framework of prioritising applications, continuing priority for long-term residents, and extended options to relieve overcrowding and support for vulnerable groups. Additionally, an inequality impact assessment was conducted as part of this report, and the impact equality assessment does not raise any concerns and supports the proposed changes. Today I am seeking Cabinet's approval for the revised social housing allocation policy, which includes the following: a clearer framework for prioritising applications, continued priority for residents with 10 or more years continuous residency, extended options to a wider range of households to relieve overcrowding, and ensuring the most vulnerable groups are supported by the policy for rehousing. It gives me pleasure this evening to move these 3 recommendations as outlined as page 18 in the Cabinet papers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tuckwell. Do you wish to say anything, Councillor Lavery? Thank you.
I'll add a couple of comments to that very comprehensive summary. The new policy will provide those residents who are seeking housing from us with a much clearer understanding of where they are in the queue, if you like, with some 3,500 households on a register, and under the existing policy, some 1,100 were in Band A. So everybody had it gave the impression that you were close to the top, when in fact, by definition, you weren't. This will, by spreading the bands out, you will have a much clearer understanding of where you are, and therefore it should, together with the communications plan that's being developed and Councillor Tuckwell will take through, make it much clearer for residents where they are, and therefore not only help them understand their housing situation and the things they might do about it for themselves, but also reduce the number of inquiries we get from residents who had the belief, because they were in Band A, that they were about to be housed, which wasn't true, and then generates a large amount of work for housing, the contact centre and others. So hopefully this will reduce that work and make it clearer for everyone.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Councillor Lavery, for steering us through this journey. I recognise what Councillor Tuckwell has said. By bringing around greater clarity, not only does it help our residents understand their position and how long they are likely to be waiting, it also helps us manage our business more efficiently. There are some enhancements in the service in this policy, as you say, about alleviating a degree of overcrowding, which is advantageous. I think this is very good news, and I thank you very much for having steered this through. Colleagues, the recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 6, the monthly council budget monitoring report. Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Leader. This report, which is set out on pages 121 to 150, reflects the council's financial position as at month 6, and that is, in effect, September 2024, which of course is the halfway point in the current financial year. This comprises an outturn forecast for the full financial year ending the 31st of March 2025 and provides an update on the zero-based budgeting project, which is addressing the substantial financial pressures which I've reported on in earlier meetings. The work on ZBB has now identified a projected in-year overspend of £30.5 million, which represents a minor improvement of £1.9 million from the position reported at month 5. This will be reduced by in-year savings measures now identified of £23.6 million, and this reflects a net improvement on the overall level of savings identified at month 5 of £8 million. This, if delivered in total, will reduce the overall in-year overspend to £6.9 million, which, if so allocated, will result in closing reserves of £28.2 million. The financial challenges faced by Hillingdon are substantial. As previously reported, key elements of the overspend include pressures relating to adult social care, looked after children and homelessness. Furthermore, shortfalls on income targets and savings were also sustained. Members should be aware that the ZBB programme has so far identified total savings amounting to £47.6 million, albeit that £24 million will fall into later financial years. I should also mention that a number of initiatives identified by the ZBB and Star Chamber processes remain to be concluded and evaluated, thus leaving the potential for these reported numbers to change further. I must once again emphasise that the extensive range of savings are subject to formal Cabinet approval, and that a key factor is that they can effectively and efficiently be delivered on a timely basis. The savings are very largely targeted at areas such as streamlining back-office functions, realising the benefits of digitisation, investor-save measures and income maximisation. I must emphasise that they do not contain cuts to key frontline services. Turning to capital expenditure, General Fund capital expenditure for the current financial year is projected at £106.6 million, which represents an £18.7 million underspend against budget. This is largely attributable to project delays and I expect to authorise the rephasing of the majority of this expenditure into later years. Turning to the dedicated schools grant, operational improvements have generated a reduction of £8.3 million in the in-year costs, albeit that a projected in-year deficit of £17.3 million still remains. Furthermore, an adverse adjustment of £4 million has been identified in respect of prior years. However, I continue to predict that continuing operational improvements in areas such as the rebanding of EHCPs and the creation of new in-borough SEN units will yield further reductions in the spend and hence the deficit, albeit that the inadequacy of central government funding into the high needs block remains a highly significant issue. It's notable that the indicated funding increase of 6% for SEN, announced by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, is nowhere near adequate to address these funding pressures. The housing revenue account has sustained a pressure of £0.6,600,000, in other words, in respect of rental income, and this is largely due to the later than anticipated arrival of housing stock. This variance is being mitigated by a reduction in the anticipated capital financing costs, largely as a consequence of the delayed arrival of the aforementioned stock. Therefore, in aggregate, the housing revenue account remains on track with budget. Capital expenditure in the housing revenue account is projected at £206.1 million for the year and is currently £1.7 million behind budget. Leader, I therefore move recommendation 1 of the report as set out on page 122. Recommendation 2 is detailed on page 148 and comprises 4 recommendations numbered A to D. These are very largely self-explanatory, albeit that I would like to draw colleagues' attention to the fact that a new deployment, part of the Household Support Fund, which is item C, will be to facilitate the provision of active support to residents who are eligible for pension credit. But however, these people are not receiving it due to the complexity of the application process. These residents on receiving pension credit will of course also qualify for the winter fuel payment, which the Labour government has removed from many of our residents. I therefore move recommendation 2. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goddard. It is uncomfortable to be the leader of a council reporting an overspend, but we must look at the context in which you are reporting that. This isn't a Hillingdon problem. This is a national problem, and the recent budget, which provided an additional £1.3 billion of money to the sector, to the local government sector, was £1 billion short of the need that had been identified by the Local Government Association. So even with the growth promised by the budget, it is not enough for councils to stand still, let alone enhance and grow. It is an uncomfortable position. I'm delighted that you have helped secure early engagement with officers to address the pressures, and that ZBB is materialising in identifying new operating models that will substantially lower our running costs and sustain them at a lower level in the future without materially impacting our key frontline services. You're to be congratulated on that work and your drive and your energy in putting that through. Colleagues, are the recommendations as set out agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 7 is simply a public preview report of matters that are considered in private. It is provided to try and assist, give more transparency to those matters which are necessarily considered in private. The issue of the topic and the decision made are published in due course. That now concludes part 1. We're now going to turn to part 2 and invite members of the public to retire and break the YouTube link. Thank you, Mark.
How many people did we have? 11. 11? 11. Well, one of